So I started checking out tool racks. Those are expensive. It's almost like the folks that build them and sell them think that just cause I drop 15, 20 grand on a tractor, I'm gonna pay out the nose for a tool rack too. I'm not gonna do that. So I set out to put together a tool rack, an organizer that would be affordable, easy to build, something that anybody could do. This is not so much a how-to video. This is more of a what I did and maybe some commentary on my thoughts behind the design decisions that I come up with. But anyway, after I got the parts list put together, it looked like I was going to be able to do this for less than $200. And so that became the goal, was the $200 tool rack. I'll include links to the major components that I used in this build. I'll put them down in the description. Enough of that, let's get into it. So here's the base of the project. This is what everything bolts to. This is a steel cargo carrier sold by Arbor Freight. It is 500-pound capacity. It fits 2-inch receivers. I happen to have a 2-inch receiver on both the front and the back of my 1025R, and it's reasonably priced, and it seemed like a good foundation to build the tool rack on. Yours doesn't have to be Arbor Freight. Just find you one that's good, that is reasonably true and rectangular, and it'll make a good foundation. Next up is a sheet of 3/4 inch treated plywood, 4 foot by 8 foot. Nothing special about it. Just pick it up wherever you can find the best deal. So I wanted the sides of this tool rack to be about 3 feet tall. And so since this was a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood, I just ripped 12 inches off the top of it. And I'll end up using this piece that I'm ripping off as a tailgate. But once I got that piece cut off, I decided I probably needed to measure the cargo carrier and make sure that it was the same dimensions on both the front and the back and both sides. I'm not going to give you the dimensions here because yours may not be exactly the same as this one, but this one ended up being the same on the same depth and width on all the way around, so it worked out pretty well. After I get all the pieces cut out, I started the assembly process. I just used some screws to screw these pieces together. Here I'm trying to measure where I want to put the screws, so they'll be the same on both sides, but as you can see, I've got plenty of help, and so this went together pretty easily. After you get all the pieces put together, the next step is to install the cargo rack inside the base of the box you just built. If you measured correctly, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. It may require a little percussive persuasion. Also, don't forget to cut out a notch for the 2-inch receiver tube. Once it's all installed, it should be flush with the bottom. Next, I'm just going to drill some holes so that I can insert some bolts and bolt the plywood to the cargo carrier. So here's the rack completed. I took it around front, hosed it off to wash all the green treatment stuff or whatever that is on there. I set it in front of a fan for a day or two to just make sure it was completely dried out before I began painting. So there's nothing special about this paint. This is John Deere green. I picked it up at Ace Hardware. Just paint it whatever color you want it. So I needed access to the back so I could paint. Couldn't do that with it sitting on the tractor, so I set it down on these sawhorses and backed the tractor out from under it. So this is 2-inch PVC pipe that I'm going to use as tool holders. These are about two 10-foot sticks, and I cut them at 36-inch intervals, which left me with 6 tubes that were 3 feet long and 2 tubes that were actually 12 inches long. So next up, I bought one 10-foot stick of 3-inch PVC pipe. I cut these at 30 inches each, which left me with 4 tubes. So here's a pro tip: if you're cutting PVC pipe with a chop saw, be sure and do it outside, because PVC pipe makes a mess. Alright, so here we are painting. This is just rattle can spray paint with primer. It doesn't cover the pink lettering on the pipe very well, but that's okay because I'm going to put the pink letters toward the plywood on the tool rack, and we'll never see it. Next up is drilling the holes for the carriage bolts that I will use to mount these pipes to the back of the tool rack. A 2-inch PVC pipe is 2 3/8 inch on the outside diameter. And so I just built a little stencil to have me mark those all in the same place. So I'm using a different drill on the bottom because I'm going to run carriage bolts all the way through this pipe at the bottom, in place of putting the 2-inch PVC caps on the bottom to hold the tools up. Those caps were $2 or $3 a piece. Anyway, I'm using the Craftsman drill because it has a level in the top of it, which lets me see that I'm drilling those vertically. Once I get the pilot holes drilled, I can switch back to the DeWalt with a little bigger bit and go ahead and finish off the drill. And I'm using the same stencil to mark the back of the tool rack. And once again, I'm using the drill with the built-in level so that I can make sure the holes are right. ring these holes out with the wall. So here I'm doing a little bit of a test fit to make sure that it's all going to go the way I had it built in my mind. I probably should have drilled those holes a little bit larger, but I wanted them to fit tight, and they did. So we do that a few more times. I put the 3-inch PVC pipe toward the inside, left the 2-inch PVC pipe on the outside. I wasn't really going for the pipe organ look, but I kind of ended up with that. As you can see, I run the carriage bolts through the bottom. Those go all the way through the plywood. So I happen to have a 2-inch receiver option on the front and the back of my 1025R. I see a lot of videos with people doing this kind of thing with the county line, carry-all or something like that. I just never could make get the price point down to where I wanted to be on something like that. I mean, let's face it, if these tools are not something that I want to use every day. You know, if I'm slinging an axe a little bit here and there, that's not a big deal. But if I get on the other end down there and I'm having to use those shovels a lot, I've had a bad day. And so, you know, I don't plan on using those shovels that very often, and I'm not going to spend an arm and a leg on a tool rack just to haul them around. So here's a close-up look at the carriage bolts. Those go all the way through to the front of the tool rack, on the back side of the tool rack. And right in the middle of the 2-inch PVC pipe, we can see that that is enough to keep the handles from poking through. And I saved $2 or $3 a piece on the PVC caps. So here's the test fit, and everything kind of come together just about the way I expected it to. So here's a pro tip. Go ahead and paint your plywood before you start cutting it up, but for sure get it all painted before you insert or install the cargo carrier, because once that's installed, you've got to paint around it, or you've got to paint the whole thing green. I haven't decided which way I'm going to go, but I think I would just like to leave the cargo rack as factory black, and which means I'm going to have to be fairly meticulous when I go in and paint the plywood down there at the bottom. So anyway, that's one of those deals where you just live and learn. So I've got some future plans for this cargo rack. Probably put some shelves in it, maybe add some more tubes, maybe a chainsaw rack, a ladder rack maybe. But I was aiming for the $200 tool rack, and I've gotten to just about $200 at this point, so I felt like this was a good stopping place. So my pallet forks actually have the 2-inch receiver built into them as well. I'll put a link to those pallet forks in the description. I'm actually kind of liking the tool rack on the front of the tractor more than the back. It works fine on the back, and I probably will use it as a little bit of ballast, especially if I leave that Yeti cooler in there. So that's going to about wrap this video up. Hit the thumbs up if you like it, subscribe, and I appreciate it. And I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.